everybody. Welcome to the Missouri Instructional Leaders Network, where we bring together Missouri instructional leaders to share their experiences, grow professional relationships, and build curriculum and instruction skills. My name is Valerie Montgomery, and this morning I am joined with two special guests, Dr. Lauren Hayes and Dr. Jenna Kammer. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah, could you share for our audience, could you share a little bit about yourselves and what you'll be discussing today?
Absolutely. I'll get started and then turn it over to Jenna. My name, as Valerie said, is Lauren Hayes. I am an associate professor of instructional technology at the University of Central Missouri. We both work at UCM in the Department of Educational Technology and Library Science. Our program has a Master's of Library Science and an EDS, and not library science, I'm sorry.
We do have that.
We do have one of those. But I meant to say a Master's of Science in Educational Technology and an EDS in Educational Technology, as well as then we have the Master's of Library Science and the EDS in Library Science as well. That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. So that, yeah, a little bit about me. Jenna?
I'm Jenna Kammer. I'm an associate professor at the University of Central Missouri as well. I teach in the library science program, and we definitely do have the Masters of Library Science too, and the EDS in librarianship. We also offer a grad certificate for school librarians who want to meet the requirements to become a school librarian.
And we're here today specifically to talk about a book we co-wrote that will be published by ISTE in December, so just a few weeks from now. And it is titled Digital Literacy Made Simple: Strategies for Building Skills Across the Curriculum.
And we started this book. We actually have another book that we wrote on digital literacy and for higher ed, and then we mostly teach teachers in our program right now. So Dr. Hayes and I had a lot of conversations about digital literacy within K through 12 and what that looks like. We both do research in the area. We look at different aspects of digital literacy. I tend to focus on scholarly communication and access and policy, and Dr. Hayes looks at digital literacy related to educational technologies and within libraries as well. And so through our conversations together in our department, we talked about basically how digital literacy could be taught within K through 12, and we started to notice that distributing digital literacy throughout the school and not necessarily focusing on teaching specific units related to digital literacy was very helpful in building digital literacy skills. And so this book explains some practical examples for how to do that.
So why digital literacy? Why is this something that we talk about in our areas of educational technology and library science? And why is this really important for teachers to be thinking about? So those are some kind of questions that we started with. And one of the main reasons is because the idea of digital natives, which is a term we've probably all heard before, has really been debunked. Like, yes, students today have grown up with a lot of technology, but the research is showing that doesn't mean they know how to use it in any specific way that really is beneficial. They still need to be taught these skills. They learn what they are curious about. So they're good with social media, they can use their phones, but that doesn't mean they have the digital literacy skills that are going to make them successful in the workforce or in their schooling. And so many of those things still need to be taught, which is why digital literacy comes into play there. We're all seeing, an increased use of technology, whether that is in the classroom or really in the workplace. I think that's only growing exponentially with the growth of artificial intelligence, which that kind of shift just in the last year has been tremendous. And so as we're seeing more and more of that type of technology come into play, from everything from writing emails to writing papers to coming up with case studies, everything, we need to be thinking about what skills students need to use to be able to use that technology and use it effectively. And then that kind of ties into that next one, just that increasing use of new types of technology. And so here we're thinking about a lot of that emerging tech in terms of artificial intelligence and virtual reality, that really kind of extended reality umbrella, which includes virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, and then even new things with like learning analytics and different types of wearable technologies as well. So with that kind of background and why we are asking these questions about digital literacy, we really wanted to define that term. That's always a good place to start. We know in education, defining our terms is important. And as Jenna mentioned, we had worked on a book previously about digital literacy and really had a lot of conversations about what we feel like a current definition is of that term. There are a lot of definitions out there that you will see. Some of the early ones really focused on a set of skills to access the internet, find, manage, and edit digital information. Those terms come from Paul Gilster, who defined digital literacy in the 90s. Then ISTE has a definition that they published in 2017, where they define digital literacy, and this is a quote, as being able to use technologies effectively and being able to effectively discover, analyze, create, and communicate information using digital tools and resources. And so you'll see in that definition, there's a focus on the skills with the terms discover, analyze, create, and communicate. And so we really thought about that, focus on skills, but also we're thinking, okay, it's more than just a skill set, because you have to have a specific skill set. You need to know what to do as interfaces on the web change, as technology changes. You need to be able to adapt to that. And so we brought in this idea of mental habits, which is something we'll talk more about in a few slides. But this is our definition, that digital literacy is the ability to evaluate and critique information that is created and shared in digital mediums. And to be digitally literate, persons must develop mental habits to adjust to new digital tools and content.
And we created this visual to kind of explain our definition and what this looks like. So if we think of digital literacy as having two parts, we have the critical part and the functional part. And then we have the mental habits, which help to make sure all of those different skills happen. Digital literacy has a lot of people tend to think that digital literacy is all about, like, how do I use a computer? How do I use the software? And that is definitely a part of digital literacy. So that's the functional part. The critical part is understanding about the information that is accessed when you are working and using the digital technology. So this is where the evaluating information comes in, synthesizing, and then being able to use tools to do that. And so the mental habits kind of support all of this. So if you don't have the resilience to continue to learn and to continue to try new things and investigate, then it is hard to develop your own digital literacy. So these are the list of skills that we identified in the book as being the skills needed for digital literacy. These are from ISTE and their getdigitalskills.org project. So these skills would be locating information, using digital technology to effectively be able to search for the relevant and reliable sources, evaluating those sources. So analyzing the different information that you find for credibility, for bias, for influence, and then interpreting that information. So being able to look at a variety of different sources, a variety of different pieces of information to understand the different perspectives. There's also expressing ideas. This is where you get into the ability to be able to create information and to be able to create something that represents like what your thoughts are, as well as what other thoughts you've found in your research. Communicating with others is a skill, and this is where this kind of gets into digital citizenship a little bit, where communicating safely and responsibly, as well as learning from others. And we're talking about, again, different perspectives too. So it's learning about different things from those who think differently and those who think the same. And then there's also navigating technology ecosystems, and you'll see this a lot in our book. But being aware that how online actions are influenced within a digital landscape. So one thing that that we talk about in our book is related to culture, and then the different entire digital ecosystem which a person is involved in every single day. So one person in a school may interact with their own personal network and social networks. They may interact with multiple aspects of technology within a school, and then being able to use that academically and personally. Okay.
So those are the skills that we're talking about when we think about digital literacy. And then that second piece of the definition is habits of mind. And this is an image that's in the book that's used with permission from the Institute for Habits of Mind. You can see the website there at the bottom. And these are the 16 habits of mind that this institute has come up with. It's not necessarily an exhaustive list, but I think it's a really good idea when you're thinking, okay, what do we want our students to be thinking about, and how do we want them to be thinking when they're working with technology and individuals? And so specifically, when we think about technology and digital literacy, we are highlighting 4 habits of mind that we think are particularly important. One is to have those evaluation skills. So be able to evaluate hardware and software to determine needs and to critique digital information. This is something that gets talked a lot about, especially with misinformation, disinformation. Problem solving, which involves having technical expertise, everything from being able to just know to reboot a computer if something isn't working the first time, to thinking, okay, this isn't working the way that I thought. Am I saving it as the wrong type of file? Do I need to look in a different part of the website for it? Lifelong learning, because how quickly technology changes and how new technology is always coming, lifelong learning is very important. And then situational understanding, that knowing what to use when can vary based on the context of you're in. It's very different if you want to find a news article about something that's happening in the world, just kind of a news article. There'd be maybe one place to go for it. But if I really want some entertainment news, that might be a very different website than if I wanted a current event about something that's happening in government, for example. So thinking about just what the situation is and what website is going to be more reliable for that type of information. So there are definite challenges when it comes to digital literacy, which is, again, one reason why we really wanted to write this book. The digital divide certainly exists from suburban, urban, rural, just what technology is accessible in all those different locations. But digital literacy still needs to be taught in all of those locations. There is a lot of demand on teachers' time. And so we need to be thinking about how we can include digital literacy without making it just something extra that has to be done on top of everything else. And that's really one of the big points of our book, is these are simple strategies that can be added into what's already being done. It doesn't have to be above and beyond what is already being done in the day-to-day classroom. So the book introduces this idea of the four corners framework, where we encourage everyone to think about digital literacy and integrating it into the curriculum through just integration. We'll talk specifically about these, but culture, modeling, and mentorship. So keep this in mind as we go through the next slides, as we jump in there. So the first one is part of the four corners is integration. And so, as I mentioned, we're really wanting to think specifically about what are some just easy, simple things that we can do kind of day to day to introduce digital literacy. One thing we have is just starting with ourselves. So that means just to look, what are our own digital literacy skills? What are we already pretty good at? Maybe you're great at Canva as one example of a tool, or you're really good at putting a PowerPoint presentation together. Whatever that might be in your context, that's something that you can turn around and share with your students without it being something extra for you to do. So maybe as you're making something that you want to, that you're going to use in class, talk to your students about how you did that as you pull it up. What template you selected. I'm just using Canva here as the example, but what template you selected, or why you selected that, explain that. And just make that thought process just out loud, so students can start seeing, oh, well, that was why they did that, and that would be a good evaluation tool for me to use in the future, or a good way for me to think about a presentation that they might not have thought about before. Emphasize digital literacy where it's already being used. So this can be if your students are learning how to type a paper in a Google Doc, for example. You can just have them open up a Google Doc, and as you're doing that, just kind of walk them through that and explain, okay, so now you're going to the Google Doc, you're opening up a new document, a new file, you want to save it, it just automatically saves, you can edit, you can save the share settings. These are all skills that they might and likely have, but they might not be necessarily thinking concretely about them, and you just talking about them as they do it can be something that then helps those skills stick in their mind long term. Think about where students may have low digital competence, maybe a skill that that they think they do need to improve on. So for example, maybe that a lot of students in your area are going to go work in jobs where they might need skills with Microsoft Office. So maybe a lot of the skills have used Word, for example, and don't use Google, but maybe you use Google in your school. Again, these are just examples. So you decide, well, if I'm in this maybe ELA class, instead of having my students use Docs to write a paper this time, I'm actually going to have them use Word. And so maybe you would need to, if your school has a computer lab, you could book the computer lab so they all have access to Word, or maybe if that isn't an option, you could just have them use a different tool online to learn that, OpenOffice, for example. So there are ways to give them some skills with different software programs that just changing it up a little bit can be really helpful to integrate. And then asking students to use digital literacy and then teach it. And this can be a really fun way of having students kind of get involved with digital literacy instruction. That we talked about, students have digital literacy skills. And so perhaps they've discovered something really fascinating with a program that they're using. Maybe you have a student who is particularly skilled at creating presentations, and you say, okay, have the student come up and share how they do that. It's just a way to kind of model, and we'll get to modeling, but just have them model that for their classmates, because that can be a really fun way of getting digital literacy in, showing that without even you as the instructor necessarily having to do anything extra. And you could ask the student to show you first before they showed the entire class, but because that would probably be the safe thing to do. But your students do have skills, so take advantage of that.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
I used to teach graphic design, and I taught Adobe Photoshop, and it took me a while to realize there's one of me and 20 of them. But if I have a few students who really understand how to use the program, they can start teaching the other students. And once it was like a switch went off when I did that, because now, kids weren't waiting for me to come show them how to use the pen tool because their neighbor could show them. So
Absolutely.
I think peer teaching is so critical with digital literacy.
Thanks for sharing that. That's a great example.
That is a great example that kind of takes us to our other parts of the model or the framework. One of them is culture. So we talk a lot about the learning culture within a school, and that essentially, as someone teaching digital literacy or wanting to improve the digital literacy of your students, you're not doing that alone, right? So there's an entire network of people who have different skills in the school, and thinking about the learning culture for that can help to kind of distribute digital literacy so that you're not doing it all by yourself. This kind of involves taking an inventory of what you have available. So who are the people who have skills, and what are the different skills? Not everyone is going to be great at everything. So your school librarian will be excellent with the information resources that are available, digital resources, including ebooks and searching for research and using article database. And so as a teacher, you can draw upon that expertise, invite the school librarian to collaborate with you, to co-teach with you, or even to just network. So if there's someone else in the building who is extremely good at another type of tool, network with them to learn more about how to do it. One of the strategies that we use in higher ed is to invite someone who is really good at a tool to talk about that to our class. And the first time we are learning from them at the same time. Next year, when we teach the same class, we now have the skills. And so we've kind of learned from our own community. And so we also encourage the teachers in the book to give professional development sessions on a technology that they like and use to show others how they're using it, as well as learn from other sessions. And basically just generally approach digital technology and learning with a growth mindset.
Can I ask you a challenging question that you may not have an answer to?
Sure.
I think we've all had the staff member who is very reluctant to use EdTech. That maybe has changed a little bit since going through COVID, but how do you recommend when you have someone like that on your staff who doesn't want to do anything digital? How do you recommend kind of getting them to have that growth mindset?
That's a perfect example of when I would recommend bringing in a collaborator. So that person doesn't have to do it all by themselves, right? If they're nervous and uncomfortable, then maybe the growth mindset for using technology is a little bit tougher, but the growth mindset for letting someone else show how it's used is usually a little bit more open. So in that case, I don't know, I would say, at least, so for example, if you're a school librarian and there is a staff member in the building like that, approach them, invite them. Hey, I know you're doing this research project on biographies. I have some great biographies to show that I could show your students how to use, and I could show them how to use the interface. I could show them how to pull the citations from that resource. It would take me 10 minutes. And so that's built working with the culture and trying to get, recognizing that some people are strong in some areas and some people are a little bit more nervous in other areas. We call that diffusion of innovation in our EdTech research.
And I'll just add too, sometimes it can be really helpful, instead of approaching it, and we talk about this in my educational technology classes, instead of approaching it with tech first, approach it as, what problems do you have in your classroom? Just what's not going well, or what would you like to be doing differently? Or what is taking up a lot of your time that you feel like maybe shouldn't be taking up a lot of your time. And having that conversation first, and then saying, and picking one of those things, because it could be a list of things that maybe want to be changed, picking one thing and saying, okay, there's one technology tool that can help you with that problem. And start with that one problem. And again, don't try to do more than one thing at a time. Just start small. And again, that's the idea of this book, Simple Strategies. Start small and then build. And then get really comfortable doing that one thing. And then say, okay, you also said, and this could be next academic year, or it could be next semester, whatever that looks like for this person, and however, we're coming to approaching the problem. But just say, okay, we've got that one thing down. Now, you also said this was a concern, or you wanted to try this, or you wanted to do this differently. Here's something else that can help you with that. And so that's really my suggestion too. And going back to what Jenna said, it's all about knowing what's going on in your school, what's happening there, so you can kind of help identify some of those if maybe the person doesn't have a list off the top of their head about things that they might want to address.
And this is where administrators can really come in. So principals can kind of open those conversations whenever the right moment is, and then to allow the time and the space to be able to discuss these problems and how they might be solved and how they might pull in resources. Another part of our framework is modeling, and this is something very familiar to teachers. Use modeling a lot. This is how I do something, and then let the students see it. And so this is often forgotten about with digital literacy. So there's so much that an adult knows how to do that kids are learning. So the modeling can be basic practices that you do, just kind of talking through them, thinking aloud as you do things, like something like, okay, you have your, for example, we set up this presentation before we started the session today, but if your students are watching you open presentations, that's not a bad thing, right? You can kind of explain what you're doing, how you organize it. You could talk about logging in and protecting your password if they see you entering your password to access something that you're showing on the whiteboard. There's just a lot of things that you do that you can talk through. And so that's what modeling kind of gets into that. And there's a lot of different ways to model. And there's silent modeling by just doing something, letting them see you do it without actually saying anything about it. And then you can do enthusiastic modeling. And this is where you're very positive about how you do something and why it's good and why you love it. And so we talk about all these different things in the book, the different ways to model. But in summary, you could say the modeling approach is the I do, we do, you do. It's just kind of like giving different opportunities to let them see what you do, let them practice it on their own, doing it together as a group as well.
And then that fourth quadrant of the Four Corners framework is mentoring. And this, just like modeling, can be done in different ways. We think that mentoring can occur between educators. So we often think of those PD sessions, but that's not the only way that we really want mentoring to occur between educators. It can be just your grade level team in secondary. It could be your subject matter team. It could just be your next door neighbor showing you something. There's a lot of different ways that this could look, and it could be going back to that culture. Who else in the building might be able to mentor you in a particular technology? And again, it doesn't have to be a formal mentoring relationship. A lot of first-year teachers will have a mentor, and that can be something where digital literacy does come into play. But this would also be informal mentoring. It can just be, hey, I know you're really good at this. Can you show me how it works? Teachers mentoring students. This probably happens a lot, but we don't necessarily think about it as mentoring. As teachers, we're constantly showing our students new things and talking about things. This is what we do, right? But you can just be a bit more intentional about this and saying, okay, I know this student really likes doing this with the computer, or I know that this student really has this skill set, or really wants to grow in this way because this is the career direction that they're interested in going. And so just being aware of some of those dynamics in your classroom in regards to technology can help you think, okay, well, I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time. And again, by extra time, I mean like 30 seconds, showing them this trick. Or it could even be like, Control-2 to double space something, or Control-F to find something. Those are things that can be mentored, really fast in class. But if you do know those specific skill sets or those things that the students want to do, kind of helping either putting students in groups to where they can start mentoring each other, so mentoring between students, or even helping the student connect with somebody else in another classroom or another teacher who might have those skills. Just thinking again about helping to network. This is probably the better way of saying it is, how can we help students build a network with their digital skills throughout the building and with each other. And then lastly, students mentoring teachers. I talked briefly about this when we were talking about integration and how students can show what they're doing with technology. But sometimes there are some good examples where students actually, and this is a little bit more purposeful, actually have set aside time where they show their teachers something specific. And there have been examples at other schools. So what happens often is that each student, and you can do it that way, where each student has a set time where they have to come and show either their one teacher or a group of teachers something that they know about tech that they think maybe their teacher doesn't know about tech. And sometimes that can just be fun, right? Especially, kind of upper elementary, where they just have found something so cool, they just can't wait to share it, where there's that set aside time, 5 minutes maybe at the beginning of class or something, where the students come and show a group of teachers or just their one teacher something cool that they found. And what's great about this is that the students really do find amazing things that they can share with their teachers, that then the teacher doesn't have to learn themselves. They've learned it from their students who already discovered something. And so there's just a lot of ways of doing this that can be very intentional without, again, taking up a lot of time, which is what we really try to emphasize over and over again in the book, is try to make this as simple for you as possible. So with that, we just want to say thank you. If there are any questions, we are always happy to answer them. Again, we are at the University of Central Missouri in Educational Technology, and Jenna's in Library Science.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do have a question. I think a lot of the questions I had you already addressed. Let's see. You mentioned that teachers don't always have a lot of time for training. Like as schools, we just don't have a whole lot of time. And you did give us some practical strategies for how to start integrating into the classroom. If I came from a school where maybe digital literacy has traditionally been taught sort of isolated in the library, what are some ways that I could sort of fast track getting those into my classroom? To start building those skills into my classroom?
That's a good question. So I think I'm going to have two responses to you. One is, if you're thinking about wanting to take digital literacy out of being kind of only in library instruction, then I think it's important to find out what is being taught in those library instruction sessions, and then figure out, okay, how can that be embedded more into what we're already doing? And that context is really important. I think for transferable skills, a lot of times you need context for these skills to really make a lot of sense. So I do think a lot of context is important for digital literacy. So that would be one thing in terms of finding out what's happening in those library instruction sessions, and then working with the librarian to come up with ways to embed that. And the second is to I'm going to kind of repeat myself a little bit with this from a previous example, but start small and pick one thing that you want to do in your classroom with maybe one project that you do throughout the year. And you could say, okay, I'm going to purposefully work to embed some digital literacy skills in this one project and see how that goes. And then if it goes well, you can decide you want to try it again for another project. If it doesn't go well, debrief and figure out why maybe it didn't go well, and have some conversations at your school, and then try again with something else. But don't get overwhelmed. Just try something small and just go from there.
Baby steps.
Yeah, and I could add to that. Coming from a library science background, it would help the librarian instruction as well if more of that was integrated into the classroom. So more research opportunities, more use of search skills and things like that. So the library, so integrating, talking to the librarian, having that kind of conversation would be one place to start. I was also going to add that that looking at, we have a in the back of our book, we have kind of a instructional design like template to use that kind of just, it uses the framework, the Four Corners framework. So where are students' skills low? So are they saving everything and their Google Drives are an absolute disaster, right? You know, that's just kind of identifying, okay, that would make my life easier as in teaching this certain area. And then kind of just using one of the, okay, well, can I do some modeling? Can I do some mentoring? Can I draw on my network? Things like that to be able to kind of work out one problem at a time.
That's a great example. I think that's a very practical example that even some of us adults could use some help with. So, well, great. Thank you so much for sharing today. And tell us, where can we get your book when it comes out?
Well, it will be available. It's already available for pre-order from ISTE directly, on Amazon, Target. I think I've seen it on the Walmart website. So you can find it in probably most of the places that you go to buy books.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us this morning, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valerie.
Bye.
Bye.